right. So, firstly, I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of Saro Academy. And today, here we would be discussing around the consent management framework under the new law that has been passed in India, that is the DPDP Act. So, I would try and make you guys familiar with the consent requirements that a business has to implement, what all things we need to do, and what are the compliance requirements that one needs to follow. So I will take you through the entire process. It's pretty simple at the moment, but we are expecting detailed guidelines and rules to come up in future so that we can implement adequately in the business. So briefly, if y'all are new to Saro and y'all don't know about what Saro Academy does, so Saro Academy has come up with a ton of courses that we have around data privacy, and you guys can get yourself certified if any one of you all wants to start a career in data privacy. So Saro Academy will help you with all the courses that are required. We are also partnered with a few institutes which we can help you get the certifications around. So there are a ton of certifications that you guys can check around Saro Academy portal. So please do have a look here. It would be a great starter for you all to get into the data privacy and build a career ahead. Also, if you all are already into the field, then it would just enhance your skills and knowledge around the same. Now, a brief introduction about myself. So, I am currently working as a data privacy consultant at Saro Consulting. I am also part of the Saro Academy. So, apart from the consulting role, I do take up sessions and the certification courses, the diploma programs around the academy that we have. So, I am engaged in that. It's been more than a year that I am in this field of data privacy, and my background is legal. So, I have done my LLB and LLM. And the master that I've completed is in technology law. So yes, that's all about me. So today, initially, I would want to make you guys understand and give a quick walkthrough of what all pointers are we going to discuss around. So I want you all to understand basically that what is the current requirement of the Indian data privacy law that has been recently passed. And previously, there was absolutely nothing that we were following at the moment. So businesses were collecting data without consent. They were processing personal information without any prior consent or notification to the individual. But now the situations have changed. So India has moved from 0 to 100, and now this shift is going to be very difficult for the business and the organizations to implement such requirements in their businesses. So there are a lot of people who are trying to understand the requirements, and for consent management, I will just try to simplify it for you guys. So, what all key pointers do we keep in mind while setting up the entire consent management? How do you notify the individuals? How do you what information do you give them? What should be the content of the notice? These things I am going to walk you guys through. Moving ahead, so a quick introduction about what consent management means. So consent is basically a clear and affirmative action from the data subject or the data principal. Now, who is the data principal or the data subject? Data principal is the individual whose personal information we are collecting here, and data fiduciary, these terms are very important for you all to understand. So these basic terminologies you will have to keep in mind throughout the entire session. So data principal, I just mentioned, would be the individual whose personal information we are collecting and processing. So that individual would be the one who will give us the consent, who would give us the permission to process and operate the personal data that we have collected. And the data fiduciary is someone who is collecting the personal data, or basically deciding the purpose and means of processing that personal information that has been collected. So in our case, it could be, let's consider a use case scenario that you are planning to buy a SIM card from a telecom company. So let's consider Vodafone. Now Vodafone would be the data fiduciary who would determine the means and purpose of collecting the personal information that is yours, the customer's personal information. So the organization or the company who determines the processing and the means of such processing of personal data would be the data fiduciary. And another terminology that you guys need to understand is data processor. Now, data processor is someone who would process the data on behalf of the fiduciary. So the main organization, whoever is collected or whoever decides the purpose and means of personal information, would also maybe outsource some work to another entity or any third party. Now, that third party would be data processor. So, in this case, consent has to be collected from the individual and inform them at the same time that your data would be further shared with the processor, and what kind of processing the data processor would be doing on that kind of personal data. So, these are the things. Now, any organization or the data fiduciary needs to set up a consent management framework, the complete process, right from collecting the consent till the time we have the data.
We are at consent, right? And consent management platform, right? So what is it, that we are doing right now? Like, where are we in terms of consent, Nidhi? And can we quickly, go to some technical stuff on consent management platform and talk about a platform as well? Okay. So when we talk about consent, right, there are five important things in consent, right? And when I say, so basically, this is something that I'm doing day in and day out, implementing consent platforms to our organizations, to my clients. So a few things that we have started being really, really careful about is, a lot of people are like, hey, IT Act is already there. And there is a consent framework in IT Act, though unfortunately IT Act was never regulated and there was no authority to regulate it. But with consent under DPDPA, and I'm just in a WhatsApp group where somebody asked me whether a cookie consent will also be treated under the consent framework, right? So I'm going to take a few questions that I also am thinking and the industry is asking me. My question is, and I think Nidhi, I'll probably also ask you this question. Right? So when somebody is on the website and he's about to click consent, right? He's about to click consent. There is a pop-up. It says, hey, if you are giving consent, then you have read this privacy notice, privacy policy, or privacy statement, right? There are three options right now in the industry. Either we give privacy notice, or we give privacy policy, or we give a privacy statement, right? Now, my question is, what is the right way of writing this? First question, Nidhi, any take of yours?
Yeah, so we can use a layered approach. We can have a small pop up initially, like a consent statement, and then we could link the detailed notice within that statement. That in case you want to have a detailed.
What should be the name, right? That's the thing. What should be the name? See, the thing is, if I'll just share the screen and I'll tell you why I'm asking this, because this is a very big question that people see. We are always thinking about tough things, but we always forget the small things, right? And the small things have beauty, right? So going to some beauty parts of life. So if I open Uber, right, and I Uber policy privacy, right? Just opening it for everyone quickly. Okay. So Uber has privacy notice, is it? If I click on privacy center, right?
They have a privacy
Uber
notice. That is what I just
privacy
saw.
notice. So let's go to Microsoft now. Yeah. Microsoft, check what they have. It's very important, guys. You don't get it, but the moment you are an in-house counsel, the next question to you will be asked, what do you write actually? So Microsoft has privacy statement. Yeah, we all agree. So Uber has a notice, Microsoft has a statement. And 90% of times when you gave consent, it was a policy. So three options, right? Why these three options work? Because the principle of transparency gets converted into the requirement of notice, because we are being transparent as an organization to tell you what we're going to do with the data. So now the most important thing that we have to think about is names can change. The goal is the same. What is the goal? The goal is to give transparency about what is going to happen. So next time when you see the difference, there is no difference. So the consent can be followed by a statement, by a policy, by a notice. But if you'll ask me, what is the best way to write it? Saro has a privacy statement. Microsoft has a privacy statement, right? Because statement gives us more understanding, because policy has to be internal. It doesn't make sense to put a policy on the website, right? It sounds childish, right? So when I say policy has to be internal, so in internal, what will be in privacy policy? Internal privacy policy will be for our employees, let's say. Internal privacy policy would be for our engagements, right? A lot of organizations in India are service-based organizations. When we are service-based organizations, we are not controllers directly. We are most of the time, 90% of the time, processors. And this is the same the case of fintech, guys. We are working with a lot of fintechs. We are working with telecoms, right? So the case is everybody wants to become a processor. Everybody wants to fight that they are a processor first of all, because they want to, they don't want obligations, and the direct obligations kind of go to the controller. And also the logic in Europe was that the controller was being caught every time, the accountability principle kind of hit the controller and the fiduciary, I mean, in India, and not just the processor, right? So nobody wants to become a controller, right? It's beautiful, right? It's beautiful how the industry works, right? Every day I'm going to a new office, and they kind of ask me, Akash, I don't want to become this. Keep this out. And I'm like, we can't, right? We just can't decide this. But I have a quick question. How do you decide if an organization is a processor or a controller?
Yeah. So for me, controller would be the person who determines the purpose and means of processing, and a processor would be someone who would process
Purpose,
on
right?
behalf. Yeah.
So anybody who decides the purpose is the controller or the fiduciary.
Right.
Perfect. Okay. Now let's take an example, right? Now, Saro, as an organization, as consulting, we have contracts with all the multinationals of India, right? But the purpose of processing was chosen by the organization that gave us project when we started building their policy, started doing their PIA, started doing their RoPAs. Who decided the purpose? The controller, the fiduciary, whose vendor we are. But when we are academy and when we are teaching C-DPO in, right, the certified data protection officer in course, when we are teaching, then who are we, Nidhi?
So we are the controllers, the
We are the
fiduciary.
fiduciaries.
Yes.
Why? Because the purpose is being decided by us. And now, if we are the fiduciaries, then whose responsibility it is to take consent? Ours, right? And then what do we need? We need a notice, we need a statement, or we need a policy.